start, Harper, when you're ready.
Okay, the first question is, tell me about your faith journey.
Tell me about it. You know, Harper, when you ask an old person, especially a woman, about their faith journey or all their years, they got lots of years to talk about. So we're liable to be here real late tonight.
Good time.
I was born at Emory Hospital in Atlanta, and when I was 5 days old, I came to live in Covington, and I've always lived in Covington. And I grew up in the Methodist church in Covington, you know, the big white Methodist church over there with all the pumpkins. And I had a sister and a brother. Both of them were younger than I was. But I had wonderful, wonderful parents who loved me lots. And they were my first heroes, my first inspiration, because they were good people, but they enjoyed life too. And we went to church every time the door was open. We went on Wednesday night, like we're doing tonight. And we went on Sunday morning and Sunday night. And anytime there was anything going on. And then jumped forward quite a few years, and I met a guy over the swimming pool that was right next to where the YMCA is now in Covington. The swimming pool is no longer there. But he was diving off a high dive, and he was a really good athlete. And we met, and we became sweethearts. And his father was a Presbyterian minister. And so when we had, you know, we had romance for a while, and then we got married, but that was part of the deal. I was going to join the Presbyterian church, because this family had always been Presbyterians, and there wasn't anything like Presbyterians, and I caught the bug song too. And we lived right here in Covington, and we lived on a farm, and we had cattle. In fact, we had milking cows to begin with, and I didn't learn to milk, but I helped out on the farm some. And it was a wonderful life. And then we had 4 children, and they grew up on that farm, and we had a great time. And you probably know some of them because they come away and they're members of this church. And I joined this church in 1960, which is a long time ago. And well, we married, our wedding was in the Methodist church, but I soon came over here and I joined the Presbyterian church after that. But when I was a little girl, we had Bible school with all the churches in Covington, the Presbyterians and the Methodists and the Baptists. And I so well remember coming to this church when I was a little bitty girl and seeing Mr. Dandy, Mr. Marshall B. Dandy. And he would lead the singing, and then he would preach. He did it all, and had a wonderful time. But I knew people who were members of this church too. And but I've always loved this church, and our children loved the church, and we were all really active in the church. And we used to have picnics, church picnics at our house, and we had a swimming pool, and everybody came out and swam. And we had what we called an ice cream social every Wednesday night, and I remember there was one man who said, "Are we gonna have a sociable tonight?" And we had just a delightful time all the time with the church people, and we were just felt so loved, and the children grew up and they had lives. They still have lives of their own. And I got real old, and but in this church I did a lot. I taught Sunday school and I did Bible school, and I remember one year I was the director of Bible school and I was the music director, and I also had, on Friday we had a picnic at my house for the under a certain age, and that night we had a sleepover in the barn, and it rained, but we still had a good time. So I really put in a week that week with Bible school, and I was involved in what they call the women of the church then, what they call it Presbyterian women now, and I was on the local level and also on Presbyterian level, which is the more churches, more Presbyterian churches in metro Atlanta. And, but all along, I was a member here. And then, we had youth, we had interns from Columbia Seminary to come and work with us, and one of them said to me one time, "Why don't you go to the seminary?" And I had not thought about Hope, but I'd been very active, with the church, and I decided I would do that. And I went to Columbia Seminary in Decatur, Georgia, and I drove up there 2 or 3 times a week. And it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time for me. I learned lots and just met all kinds of wonderful, wonderful people. And the professors were so brilliant and wonderful. But while I was there, our house burned out on the farm. And this church was wonderful to us, just wonderful. Absolutely, I'll never forget coming. In fact, my husband and I, and a couple of my children and some of my grandchildren and I were at Montreat at a conference, or maybe it was just a retreat. And my brother called and they called my husband out of the dining room and told my husband that our house was burning. And when we drove home, and people from our church were at that burning up house right then. And I'll never forget how wonderful it brought us food and just took care of us. It made the whole difference, the whole difference. The loss wasn't bad because the people were so sweet to us. And what else? But since then, I have gotten much older, and I have recently been living over at Presbyterian Village in Athens. It's for old folks, but I'm one of the oldest. And we have a wonderful time, and I help with the chaplain some there. But while I was at Columbia Seminary, I did what was called clinical pastoral education for a whole year. And I worked as a chaplain in a hospital. I didn't get paid anything, but I was working at Georgia Baptist Hospital, which was in Atlanta, and it's no longer there. In fact, it became Atlanta Medical Center, I believe, and that's no longer there either. I guess the buildings are. But that meant a lot to me, because I would visit people in the hospital rooms, and it just really fed my spirit. But I talk too much.
What do you love about our congregation?
About our congregation. They're so genuine, so real, and so kind and so loving and forgiving and faithful and always eager to, they act like they're eager to see me, and that makes me feel real good. The young folks and the old folks too, but I'm one of the oldest, Carl.
I think we did okay. What advice would you give a person new to faith or church?
Who is coming into the church? Just let God love you. Just don't keep from letting God love you, because that it happens. And stick with it. Stay with the church. And that's what I'll tell you. You just let God love you, sugar. You're just delightful. Woo! It's the winter.
Yes.
I'm so glad I got to meet you.
Me too.
Thank you, darling. Let's get together again. Maybe you can bring some of the young folks over to Presbyterian Village in Athens. I'll show you around.
Y'all can have a ping pong tournament.
Oh,
Play ping pong?
I'm playing ping pong.
you might ought to need to
I do
learn.
other things too.